I once got hopelessly lost in a city I'd never visited, wandering around, no idea where I was, phone battery at 3%. At least that's what I told the examiner. In reality, I made the whole thing up, every single detail. Band 8. And today, I'm going to show you exactly how I built that answer and how you can do the same thing in 60 seconds of planning time.
Welcome to the IELTS Speaking Podcast. I'm Felicity, and I'm joined by Anthony, a former IELTS speaking examiner with over 10 years of real test experience across thousands of actual candidates. And what you just heard is actually kind of a perfect summary of today's episode.
It really is. Look, describe a time you lost your way is a current Part 2 cue card in the 2026 exam rotation. And it is one of those topics that on the surface sounds challenging. Oh, I need a real memory. I need to remember exactly what happened. And in reality, it's one of the easiest topics to fabricate convincingly because getting lost is such a universal human experience that any story sounds believable.
And just to reinforce something for anyone new to the channel, the fabrication principle comes from episode 5. Content accuracy is not assessed in IELTS speaking. What the examiner is marking is your language, the vocabulary you use, your fluency, your grammar, your pronunciation, not whether the story actually happened. So if you missed episode 5, go back and listen. It'll change how you approach this entire exam.
Right. And today we're going to cover everything you need: the cue card structure, the 1 minute planning strategy, a full Band 8 model answer with breakdown, the emotional vocabulary that examiners love to hear, and your quick wins at the end. Let's go.
Okay, so let's start with what the cue card actually asks. It says, describe a time you lost your way. You should say where you were going, how you got lost, what you did to find your way, and explain how you felt about the experience. That's the standard structure. Anthony, when you were examining, how did candidates typically handle this?
The most common approach was just chronological narration. I went to a city. I got on the wrong bus. I asked someone for help. I felt scared. And that structure isn't wrong, but it's flat. There's no texture, there's no emotional arc. And what makes a Part 2 answer genuinely impressive to an examiner is exactly that: an arc: confusion, escalation, resolution, reflection.
Confusion, escalation, resolution, reflection. Say more about that.
So think of it like a mini story. Every good story has a moment where things go wrong. That's confusion. Then things get a little bit worse or more stressful. That's escalation. Then something shifts and you find your way. Resolution. And then there's a moment where you look back on it and say something meaningful about the experience. Reflection. 4 stages. And you can build a convincing 2 minute answer out of just those 4 things.
And crucially, any lost experience fits this structure, real or imagined.
Exactly. You could be lost in a city, lost in a forest, lost in a shopping mall, lost in an airport in a foreign country. The setting doesn't matter. The arc is universal. And the examiner has heard thousands of these. What stands out is the language around the arc, not the uniqueness of the setting.
All right, let's do the planning minute first. Walk me through how you'd use 60 seconds on this cue card.
Okay, so in your 60 seconds of planning, you're not writing sentences, you're jotting down 4 anchor points, one for each stage of the arc. So for getting lost, let's say lost in Osaka, Japan. First visit, no Japanese language skills. Anchor 1, confusion. Got off the wrong subway exit, street names I couldn't read. Anchor 2, escalation. Phone died, started walking in circles, increasingly panicked. Anchor 3, resolution. A local noticed I was struggling, drew me a map by hand. Anchor 4, reflection. Felt deeply grateful and actually a little proud that I handled it.
4 anchor points. You're not scripting the answer, you're setting the waypoints.
Right, because if you try to script, you run out of time and your delivery sounds robotic. If you just have 4 anchors, your language flows naturally because you're describing from a mental picture, not reciting from memory.
Okay, let's hear the full Band 8 model answer. 2 minutes. And listeners, pause after this if you want to really absorb it, then come back for the breakdown.
Right. So this is actually something I think about quite often because it was genuinely one of the more disorienting experiences I've had. It was a few years back. I was visiting Osaka in Japan for the first time, completely on my own. and I came up out of the wrong subway exit, which sounds minor, but the street layout there is incredibly complex. And every sign was in Japanese, which I can't read at all. So I had this immediate sense of disorientation. Like I had no idea which direction I was facing, which way the hotel was, nothing. What made it worse was that my phone battery died almost immediately after that. So I'm standing in the middle of this busy Japanese street with no map, no language, no way of Googling anything. And I'd say I started to feel genuinely a bit panicked at that point. Not frightened exactly, but that kind of helpless, frustrated feeling when you can't solve something that should be straightforward. So, what I did was, I just started walking, which I'm not sure was the smartest decision, but I figured if I could find a landmark I recognized, a big intersection, a department store I'd walk past that morning, I could reorient myself. And after about 20 minutes of circling, this older gentleman, he must have noticed me looking increasingly lost because he came up to me, said something in Japanese, and when I looked blank, he just picked up a pen and drew me a little map on a piece of paper hotels, landmarks, directions, handed it to me, and bowed. And I made it back. And looking back at it now, it's actually quite a fond memory because of that one moment of completely unexpected kindness from a total stranger. I think it taught me something about how people will help you if you let yourself look lost enough to need it.
That's genuinely lovely.
And completely made up.
Completely fabricated, but you see what I mean. You feel like it happens because the emotional truth is real, even when the details aren't.
That's exactly it. The examiner doesn't know I've never been to Osaka. What they hear is natural fluency, emotional vocabulary, a coherent narrative arc, and complex grammatical structures. That's what gets marked.
Let's break down the vocabulary because there were some beautiful phrases in there. The first one I want to highlight is disorienting.
Right. Disorienting. That's your core emotional word for lost. Most candidates say confused or I didn't know where I was. Disoriented is more precise, more evocative, and it scores significantly higher on lexical resource. I was completely disoriented. Four words that immediately paints a picture.
Then, what made it worse was I love this phrase.
This is your escalation trigger. The moment you say what made it worse was, the listener leans in because you've signaled that the story is about to get more complex. It's a narrative device as much as a language device, and it's a very natural English expression. Not formal, not textbook, but exactly what a native speaker would say.
What about I had no idea where I'd ended up? Is that different from just saying I was lost?
Significantly different. I was lost is a simple, flat statement. I had no idea where I'd ended up uses past perfect, had ended up, which already signals grammatical complexity to the examiner. And where I'd ended up implies a journey, a process of getting somewhere unintentionally. It's richer. The examiner is listening for exactly those kinds of natural, complex structures.
What are the other key phrases from the model answer listeners should grab?
A few big ones. Genuinely a bit panicked. The word genuinely makes it feel ominous and unrehearsed. That kind of helpless, frustrated feeling. Naming two emotions together shows emotional vocabulary range. Reorient myself. Reorient. Lovely verb, very specific to the getting lost context. Completely unexpected kindness. This is your reflection vocabulary. It elevates the ending from just someone helped me to something with emotional resonance. And looking back on it now, that's your reflection signal. It tells the examiner you're moving from story to meaning, which is exactly the structure they want to hear.
Okay, let's talk about the 1 minute cue card for listeners who get a different version of this topic, because sometimes it might say, describe a time you were in an unfamiliar place, or describe a time something went wrong during a journey. Same arc?
Same arc entirely. Confusion, escalation, resolution, reflection. The arc is your skeleton. You put different flesh on it depending on the specific prompt. And remember, you have 1 minute, so the planning is about anchors, not sentences. Setting, confusion, what got worse, what helped, how you felt looking back. Five things. That's your minute.
Beautiful. Now, before we get to the quick wins, I want to flag something for listeners. If you want a full template for building part two stories from scratch, including the vocab banks for emotions, for settings, for reflection language, we've put everything into our free resource pack, and the link is in the description below. It takes 2 seconds to download, completely free, and it works for any part two narrative question, not just this one.
Really worth grabbing, honestly, especially if you've got a test coming up in the next few weeks.
Okay, quick wins. Anthony, 3 things listeners can take away and use immediately.
Quick win number one: memorize the arc, not the story. Confusion, escalation, resolution, reflection. That four-part structure works for any narrative part two question. A time something went wrong, a time you achieved something, a time you helped someone. Learn the skeleton. Build the flesh fresh for each question.
Beautiful. Quick win number 2. Upgrade your emotional vocabulary. Don't just say scared or happy. Say genuinely a bit panicked, a growing sense of helplessness, quietly relieved, oddly proud, unexpectedly moved. Emotions with adverbs and qualifiers score significantly higher on lexical resource than single word feelings.
And quick win number three: end with reflection. This is what separates Band 6 from Band 8 in Part 2 more than almost anything else. After your story, add one sentence that looks back. Looking back on it now, I realize, or in hindsight, I think it taught me, or it's actually quite a fond memory now because that reflection sentence signals sophisticated thinking and natural narrative structure. It is the thing that makes the examiner put their pen down and go, that was a very good answer.
Confusion, escalation, resolution, reflection. Emotional vocabulary with adverbs. End with a reflection sentence. 3 things. You can do all 3 in your next practice session today.
And if you want to see this exact storytelling framework applied to a completely different Part 2 topic, episode 15 is the one. We go deep on storytelling technique across all kinds of narrative cue cards. Go back and listen if you haven't.
Next up, episode 33. We're taking the getting lost theme into part 3 territory. Abstract discussion questions about technology, navigation, independence, and whether getting lost actually has value in the modern world. Anthony has some genuinely surprising examiner insights on how candidates handle abstract questions. That's tomorrow's episode.
And if today clicked for you, hit subscribe. We're publishing multiple episodes a week right now, and every single one is built around this exact kind of examiner level breakdown. You won't find this depth anywhere else. We'll see you in episode 33.